You feel like your toes? I wanna stick in my head.
Poke my head under your hose.
The collection of band names that are collectively known as Foetus were a solo project by Australian musician J.G. Thirlwell. So it's confusing because he performed and recorded under a vast variety of names, and quite a number of them have the word fetus in them. He started as Foetus Under Glass in 1981, possibly the one that I've most commonly heard referred to as Scraping Foetus Off the Wheel. And it's obvious that this is designed to be shocking. He did 10 albums under band names, and band is in inverted commas because it's all him anyway. But under the names that have the word fetus in. He also has 10 albums under other names, including his actual own name, and he's got collaborations as well. So he tended to change names about as often as other people change cars or clothes, maybe even. He has been cited as being foundational for the formation of industrial music. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the third album released under a band name with the word fetus in it. It was the first one credited to Scraping Foetus Off the Wheel. My awareness of this guy and his names has been kind of very vague. I knew that he was around. I knew particularly of the name Scraping Foetus Off the Wheel. I once saw a performance by him on, I think it was The Tube, which was a UK live music show way back in the 80s. And my memory of it was that his performance was pretty extreme in all sorts of ways, but I couldn't remember what it was like musically. So this was a new experience for me, listening to this album. So let's try and do some description of what it's like. So firstly, my imagination of what it was going to be like before I heard it was that it would be less musical than it is. It's kind of crossing over between musical and industrial, I guess. Description. There's a lot of drums and percussive stuff. There's almost always drums. There's percussive sound effects as well. So things like metal being hit, things being dropped, things smashing, etc. kind of built in with this. And these create kind of loose beats. They are either, played continuously or I hesitate to say samples, but I think they might well be samples that have been strung together and looped. The concept of being exactly on the beat is not as strong as you might think, so it's quite loose in that sense. Accompanying this, there's all sorts of other sounds. There's particularly some raw electric guitar sound, which sounds like it's been detuned somewhat. So it's deliberately kind of out of tune and punkish, but not in a bad way. It's in a way that works quite well. There's other things, there's keys, and I think there's just loads of samples. And I know this is very early for sampling stuff, 1984, I think it is. But it reminds me of some of the really early electronica stuff. There was an outfit in the UK called ZZ Sputnik who did a track that I think got to number one in the UK charts, which was similar in the sense of kind of repetition and it being sequenced in samples. The general feel of it is very high energy and bombastic. It's got a kind of punkness to it. And partly in the sounds that are used is very raw, deliberately so. And the thing that was most surprising to me was the prevalence of a rockabilly kind of feel to it. Now, some of that is in the chords that's used, some of it's in the use of guitar lines that sound kind of rockabilly. Some of it's in the fact that quite a lot of it is in kind of 6/8 time or sort of swung. But yeah, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Right on to words. There are spoken samples that are used here. That's very obvious at the start. We start with a couple of spoken clips right at the start of the first track. And then there's his vocals, which are kind of shouted / screamed, not really sung. Again, there's a fair amount of repetition. You can mostly hear what he's talking about, and it is effective. It fits with the music very well, and this kind of high energy punk rawness to it. The subject matter is, I would classify it as dark humour generally. Again, there are deliberate attempts here to be shocking. I'm sure. There's religious stuff, particularly along the lines of the devil, hell, and death. But there's stuff about Nazism. There's a song called Sick Man, which is about somebody I'm not really sure. I haven't picked up quite what he does, but he writes about it in his diary. And it's kind of dark fantasy stuff, basically. And if this means anything to you, either of these references, I would say that the subject matter is similar to Nick Cave, possibly even darker. And sound-wise, it's kind of like Nick Cave meets Temple Tudor with a whole lot of punkness thrown in. It surprised me, and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it a huge amount, but I did enjoy it a good amount. It's a bit on the extreme side, I would say, compared with some of the excesses of modern metal. I would say it's not as far out as that. I would say I'm going to listen to it twice, and I've had snippets as well since. I would say that my first time listening was definitely the best experience because it was so surprising as I went through. So I don't know if it grows old very quickly. I suspect not, but I think the element of surprise is one that's worth having there. So I would encourage you, if you're reasonably up for something that's a bit kind of weird and noisy and those sort of things, to give it a listen, because you might enjoy it. What do you think? Have you listened to this album? Do you know about this album? Do you know more about this guy? I'd love to hear. Please let me know in the comments. And as you've probably gathered by now, this is a big journey that I'm on, listening to and reviewing the 3,000 best albums ever, according to a list. See the details. Come and join me on this journey. Click subscribe, and I'd love to have you along with me. So, that's it from me for now.
I like to stay in holy places. I'm happiest to consecrated ground. I worship the earth that I walk upon. I seldom eat anything but sacred cow. I work in the church of my soul. My head holds a temple and a holy crown. I am pure of heart, but salvation ain't enough. I'm destined to live in this street of shame.